My name is Haley Mitchell, and I'm 28 years old. I'm sitting in an upscale law office in downtown Boston, the cold leather chair a stark contrast to the warmth of memories flooding my mind. 3 months ago, my parents died in a car accident that no one saw coming. They were only in their 60s, with decades of life still ahead of them. What I was about to discover in this office would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Before I dive into this story, if you're watching this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what happened next. I grew up in a middle-class household in suburban Massachusetts, about 40 minutes outside of Boston. Our house was modest but comfortable, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, with a small backyard where Dad would grill every Sunday during the summer months. I shared a bedroom with my sister Emma until I was 16. Emma is 2 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she was the undisputed star of our family. My parents, Michael and Catherine Mitchell, were hard-working people with traditional values. Dad owned a small hardware store that he built from nothing after working for someone else for 15 years. He was proud of that store. Mitchell's Hardware was known throughout the community for its exceptional customer service and my father's encyclopedic knowledge of tools and home repair. Mom was an elementary school teacher, devoted to her third graders for over 30 years at the same school. They emphasized education, responsibility, and independence in their parenting. At least that's what they said. In reality, their values seemed to apply differently depending on which daughter they were dealing with. From early childhood, the differences in how they treated us were subtle but unmistakable. I was always the more studious one. Quiet, responsible, and slightly introverted, I found joy in books and learning. I maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school and was involved in debate club, math team, and the school newspaper. Emma was outgoing, charismatic, and athletic. She was a solid B student who excelled at soccer and was elected homecoming queen our senior year. She had a magnetic personality that drew people to her, including our parents. When I won the state science fair in 10th grade, Mom and Dad couldn't attend because they had tickets to Emma's soccer tournament in a neighboring state. When I was selected as valedictorian, they were genuinely proud but didn't make nearly the fuss they did when Emma was accepted to the dance team. At my high school graduation, where I delivered the valedictorian speech, they spent more time consoling Emma because she'd just broken up with her boyfriend than congratulating me on my achievement. I don't want to paint them as terrible parents. They loved me, I know they did. They just loved Emma differently. More openly. More enthusiastically. I kept telling myself that I was imagining the discrepancy, that I was being oversensitive. I pushed down my feelings and focused on achievement, thinking that if I just accomplished enough, they would see me. When college applications came around, I applied for every scholarship I could find. I was accepted to several prestigious universities but chose the state school that offered me a full ride. I worked part-time at the university library to cover my living expenses. Emma, on the other hand, got into Northeastern University, a private institution with a hefty tuition price tag. Mom and Dad didn't hesitate to pay it in full, along with her apartment and living expenses. Emma needs the full college experience to network and build connections, Dad explained when I questioned the disparity. You're so independent and responsible, Haley. We know you'll be fine no matter what. It was the recurring theme of our family. Emma needed more, deserved more, got more. I needed less, could handle more, and therefore received less support. The pattern continued well into our 20s. After college, I moved into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and took an entry-level position at Boston General Hospital in the administration department. I lived frugally, packed lunches, took the bus, and slowly worked my way up the career ladder. Within 5 years, I was overseeing a department of 15 people as the assistant director of patient financial services. I saved diligently for a down payment on a condo, building my credit score, and planning for my future without assistance. My relationship with my parents as an adult was cordial but somewhat distant. I called weekly and visited for major holidays. We talked about surface-level topics, work, the weather, local news. I avoided deeper conversations because they inevitably led to comparisons with Emma or dismissal of my feelings. I loved them, but I had built emotional walls to protect myself from the constant reminder that I was somehow less deserving of their enthusiasm and attention. I thought I had made peace with it. I convinced myself that I was stronger for having made my own way. But deep down, a small part of me still longed for that unreserved approval they so readily gave my sister. After college, Emma's career path was considerably less straightforward than mine. She graduated with a marketing degree but struggled to find her footing professionally. Her first job was with a small advertising agency, where she lasted about 8 months before quitting over creative differences with her boss. She then bounced to a PR firm, which let her go after 6 months during company restructuring. Her third position was with a startup that went under within a year. Throughout each of these career setbacks, my parents were her unwavering support system, both emotionally and financially. When she was between jobs, which happened frequently, Dad would supplement her unemployment benefits with loans that were never repaid. When she complained about having a difficult boss, Mom would spend hours on the phone with her, validating her frustrations and assuring her she deserved better treatment. Despite her professional instability, Emma maintained a lifestyle that someone with her income shouldn't have been able to afford. Her apartment in one of Boston's trendier neighborhoods cost nearly twice what I paid for my place. Her closet was filled with designer clothes, Prada shoes, Gucci bags, and Burberry coats. She took lavish vacations to Cabo San Lucas, Paris, and the Amalfi Coast, posting endless photos on social media that made her life look like a glamorous adventure. I later discovered that our parents had been subsidizing this lifestyle all along. They helped with her rent when she was a little short this month. They bought her a new car when her old one needed expensive repairs. They gave her generous birthday gifts and Christmas bonuses throughout the year that amounted to a substantial second income. Meanwhile, I continued building my career with steady determination. By 26, I had been promoted to Director of Financial Services, overseeing a budget of several $1 million and a staff of 30. I had finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest condo in a decent neighborhood, an achievement that had taken me years of careful budgeting and overtime work. When I shared the news with my parents over Sunday dinner, their response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, before immediately turning to Emma. "Emma, tell Haley about your trip to Barcelona next month." Later that evening, I overheard my parents discussing helping Emma with the down payment on a luxury condo in Back Bay, one of Boston's most expensive neighborhoods. The amount they planned to give her was 3 times what I had spent years saving for my own place. When I carefully broached the subject with my father, his justification was familiar: Emma needs more help establishing herself. "You're already so successful and responsible. You understand, don't you, Haley? Your sister isn't as financially savvy as you are." Family gatherings became increasingly difficult as the disparity in our treatment became more pronounced. At Thanksgiving, Emma would arrive late, contribute nothing to the meal preparation, yet receive endless praise for the store-bought pie she'd grabbed on the way over. I would spend days helping Mom cook and clean, only to have my efforts taken for granted. Christmas was perhaps the most obvious display of the imbalance. My gifts from my parents were practical: a new set of cookware, gift cards to office supply stores, sometimes clothes for work. Emma would unwrap designer jewelry, expensive electronics, or envelope containing checks with multiple zeros. The last time I attempted to discuss the favoritism with my parents was about 2 years before their death. Mom dismissed my concerns immediately. "You're just jealous of your sister," she said firmly. "Emma has a different personality than you do. She's more sensitive and needs more encouragement. You've always been the strong one." Dad was slightly more receptive but ultimately delivered the same message: "We're proud of both our daughters, but you and Emma have different needs. You're financially stable and successful. Emma is still finding her way." By then, Emma and I had grown increasingly distant as adults. The closeness we shared as children had eroded under the weight of the preferential treatment. We still texted occasionally and met for obligatory coffee dates every few months, but our conversations remained superficial. I couldn't express my true feelings without sounding like the bitter, jealous sister, so I maintained a polite facade while keeping my sister at arm's length emotionally. The last time we were all together before the accident was Thanksgiving, just 4 months ago. Emma arrived 2 hours late, disrupting the carefully timed dinner preparations. She announced she'd been laid off again but was thinking about starting her own social media consultancy. Mom and Dad immediately showered her with encouragement, offering to help her financially until the business took off. I sat silently, picking at my turkey, remembering how when I'd been considering starting my own healthcare consulting business the year before, my father had cautioned me about the risks and suggested I appreciate the stability of my hospital position. By the time we gathered for pumpkin pie, the tension inside me had built to a breaking point. When Emma casually mentioned the extravagant Christmas gift she was hoping for, a 2-week yoga retreat in Bali, I excused myself to the kitchen, unable to maintain my composure any longer. Mom followed me, her expression concerned. "Are you feeling all right, Haley? You seem off today." For a moment, I considered unleashing decades of hurt and resentment. Instead, I swallowed hard and said, "Just tired from work. End of year is always busy." She patted my shoulder absently. "You work too hard. Emma says you should take more time for self-care." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Little did I know that would be our last Thanksgiving together, and that the family dynamic I had endured for 28 years was about to reveal itself in ways I never could have imagined. The call came on a Tuesday morning in February. I was in the middle of a budget meeting when my phone vibrated with Emma's name on the screen. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail and called back later, but something made me excuse myself from the conference room. "Emma?" I answered, stepping into the hallway. Her voice was unrecognizable, distorted by sobbing. "Haley, it's Mom and Dad. There's been an accident. You need to come to Massachusetts General right now." The drive to the hospital exists in my memory as a series of disconnected images. The red light I barely stopped for. The ambulance that screamed past me on the highway. The parking garage ticket machine that wouldn't accept my credit card. My hand shaking so badly I dropped my phone twice trying to call Emma back. By the time I reached the emergency department, it was too late. My parents had been traveling on Route 2 when a tractor-trailer lost control on the icy road, crossing the median and hitting their car head-on. "They died on impact," the doctor told me gently. "They didn't suffer." Emma was already there, collapsed in a chair, surrounded by nurses offering tissues and water. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process the information. My mind kept rejecting the reality, offering alternative explanations. Maybe there had been a mistake with the identification. Maybe they were actually in surgery. Maybe this was a nightmare from which I would soon wake up. But as the hospital staff led us to the small private room where we would need to identify their bodies, the truth became unavoidable. My parents were gone. In an instant, without warning or goodbye. The days that followed passed in a fog of shock and administrative tasks. As always, I took charge of the practical matters while Emma handled the emotional ones. I contacted the funeral home, arranged the service, wrote the obituary, and began the paperwork for death certificates. Emma made tearful phone calls to relatives and friends, selected flowers, and chose photographs for the memorial display. Our relatives rallied around Emma, offering constant comfort and support. "She was always so close to your parents," my Aunt Diane commented while watching Emma sob in the funeral home office. "This is hitting her especially hard." I nodded mechanically, returning to the paperwork for the burial plots. No one seemed to notice that I hadn't cried yet, that I was functioning on autopilot, that I might need comforting too. The funeral was held at the church where we'd attended services growing up. It was standing room only, a testament to how many lives my parents had touched. As the pastor spoke about their dedication to family, I glanced at the first row pew where Emma sat surrounded by supportive relatives. I was seated there too, physically present but emotionally adrift, separated from the communal grieving by the invisible wall that had always existed between me and the rest of my family. During the eulogy, Emma broke down so completely that my uncle had to help her back to her seat. The entire congregation murmured sympathetically. They were her world, I overheard someone whisper. Poor thing, they were so close. I sat still, my grief locked inside a frozen chamber in my chest. I wondered if something was wrong with me, if my inability to break down publicly somehow proved I had loved them less. Only later would I understand that my emotional restraint was both a coping mechanism and the result of years of conditioning to be the strong one who never needed support. After the service, as people filed past with condolences, the pattern continued. Your sister is devastated, they would say. Take care of Emma. Few seemed to consider that I might be devastated too, albeit in a less visible way. That night, alone in my condo, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of my loss. I found an old photo album in my closet, pictures from before the family dynamic had fully calcified into its final form. There was 6-year-old me on Dad's shoulders at a county fair. Mom teaching me to bake cookies. The 4 of us at Cape Cod, building sandcastles. I also found a book my father had given me for my high school graduation, a collection of Robert Frost poems. Inside the cover, he had written, to my thoughtful daughter, who always finds the road less traveled. Love, Dad. It was in these small, private moments that I found genuine connection with my parents, away from the shadow of comparison with my sister. These were the memories I clung to as I finally allowed myself to weep. 3 days after the funeral, the family lawyer, Lawrence Davidson, called to inform us that there would be a formal reading of the will in 3 months. There are some complex financial matters to sort out first, he explained. Your parents' estate was substantial, and we need to ensure everything is properly assessed and documented before proceeding. There was something in his tone when he spoke to me, a slight hesitation, perhaps discomfort, that raised a flag in my mind. But grief had dulled my instincts, and I dismissed the concern as paranoia. Is there anything I should know before the reading? I asked. The will speaks for itself, he replied carefully. Your parents made their wishes clear. Those words would return to haunt me in the months that followed. 3 months after the funeral, I found myself sitting in the reception area of Davidson and Associates, the law firm that had handled my parents' legal affairs for over 20 years. The office was located in a renovated brownstone in Boston's financial district, all polished mahogany and leather-bound law books, the kind of place that exuded old money and discretion. I arrived 15 minutes early, as was my habit for any appointment. The receptionist offered me water or coffee, which I declined. My stomach was already in knots, a vague sense of foreboding growing stronger with each passing minute. At exactly 10 a.m., Lawrence Davidson emerged from his office to greet me. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit. Haley, thank you for coming, he said, shaking my hand firmly but briefly. We're still waiting for your sister. Of course we were. Emma was chronically late to everything. Why don't you wait in the conference room? She should be here shortly, he suggested, leading me into a room dominated by a large oval table. I sat alone for 20 minutes, studying the diplomas and certificates that lined the walls, before Emma finally arrived. She was wearing an expensive-looking black dress that seemed more appropriate for a cocktail party than a will reading, her eyes hidden behind large sunglasses despite the cloudy day. Sorry I'm late, she announced as she breezed in, air-kissing my cheek. Traffic was a nightmare. Lawrence followed her in, accompanied by a younger associate who carried a thick folder of documents. They took seats across from us, arranging papers with deliberate precision. Now that we're all here, we can proceed with the reading of the last will and testament of Michael and Catherine Mitchell, Lawrence began formally. Before I start, I want to express again my personal condolences. Your parents were not just clients but dear friends of mine for many years. He cleared his throat and began reading from the document before him, starting with the standard legal preamble. I half listened to the formal language, my mind wandering to practical questions about what would happen to the house, the business, the various accounts and investments. Would we sell the hardware store? Would one of us buy out the other's share of the house? My attention snapped back when Lawrence said, regarding the distribution of assets. To our daughter, Emma Catherine Mitchell, we bequeath the following: our primary residence at 247 Maple Street in Lexington, Massachusetts, including all furnishings and personal property therein, with an approximate market value of $850,000. Our retirement accounts and investment portfolios with Fidelity Investments and Vanguard Group, with a combined approximate value of $1,200,000. The life insurance policies through Metropolitan Life Insurance Company with a death benefit of $500,000. Mitchell's Hardware, including the business assets, inventory, and the commercial property at 1832 Main Street in Lexington, Massachusetts, with an approximate value of $400,000. My brain struggled to process what I was hearing. It sounded like everything was going to Emma. But that couldn't be right. Surely my portion was coming next. Lawrence continued, to our daughter, Haley and Mitchell, we bequeath the following personal items: the family photo albums, Catherine's collection of cookbooks and recipes, Michael's collection of Robert Frost poetry, and the pearl necklace that belonged to Catherine's mother. He paused, looking up from the document. The room had gone completely silent. That's it? I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. Lawrence shifted uncomfortably in his chair. There is an additional explanation your parents wanted included, he said, returning to the document. We have made this decision after careful consideration. Emma will need the financial security that Haley has already achieved through her own efforts. We are immensely proud of Haley's independence and success, which has demonstrated she is more than capable of continuing to provide for herself. Emma requires additional support to establish stability in her life. We believe this distribution reflects what each of our daughters truly needs from us. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I couldn't breathe properly, my chest constricting as if bound by invisible ropes. I gripped the arms of my chair to steady myself, my fingernails digging into the leather. I looked at Emma, expecting to see shock matching my own. Instead, I caught a fleeting expression before she composed her features into appropriate grief, an expression that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't surprised at all. You knew about this, I said, the words coming out flat and hard. Emma removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were dry and clear. Haley, I'm as shocked as you are. The lie hung in the air between us. I turned to Lawrence, who was studiously avoiding my gaze. Is this legal? Can they just disinherit me like this? He cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable. In Massachusetts, parents are under no legal obligation to leave equal shares to their children. They have the right to distribute their assets as they see fit. The will was properly executed, witnessed, and notarized. I'm afraid it is entirely valid. When was this will drafted? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. The current version was updated 2 years ago, he replied. They made some minor revisions to an earlier draft. 2 years ago. Around the time I had last confronted them about their favoritism toward Emma. Around the time I had finally started to establish boundaries to protect myself emotionally. There must be some mistake, I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. This can't be what they actually wanted. Lawrence's expression was one of professional sympathy mixed with genuine discomfort. I'm sorry, Haley. I personally discussed these provisions with your parents at length. This was their explicit wish. Emma reached across the table, attempting to take my hand. I jerked away from her touch. Haley, we can talk about this, she said softly. I'm sure we can work something out. I stood up so abruptly my chair tipped over backward, crashing to the floor with a sound like a gunshot. I need some air, I managed to say before bolting from the room. I stumbled out of the law office into the bright spring morning, the sunlight feeling like a cruel joke against the darkness that had just descended on my life. My legs carried me automatically toward the parking garage where I'd left my car, but I had no clear destination in mind. I just needed to get away. Behind me, I heard the glass door of the building swing open, followed by the click of heels on concrete. Haley! Wait, please. Emma called after me. I kept walking, increasing my pace, but she caught up to me as I reached the entrance to the parking structure. Her hand closed around my arm, forcing me to stop and turn toward her. "Can we please talk about this?" she pleaded, her expression a perfect mask of concern. "I know this is a shock." I stared at her, really seeing her for perhaps the first time. The designer sunglasses pushed up on her perfectly highlighted hair. The diamond studs in her ears that I knew cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The manicured nails digging into my arm. All of it paid for by our parents, and now, apparently, their entire estate. "A shock?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Is it really a shock, Emma? Because you didn't look surprised in there. Not even for a second." She dropped her hand from my arm, taking a small step back. "I'm just processing it differently," she said defensively. "We all grieve in our own way." "Stop it," I cut her off. "Just stop the act. You knew about this will, didn't you? Tell me the truth for once." Emma's face changed then, the sympathetic expression falling away to reveal something harder, more calculating. She glanced around the parking lot to ensure we were alone before responding. "Fine," she said, her voice losing its affected softness. "Yes, I knew the general terms. Dad discussed it with me a couple of years ago." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd already suspected it. "And you were okay with it? With taking everything and leaving me nothing?" "They made their decision, Haley. I didn't force them to write the will that way." But something in her eyes, a flicker of evasion, made me push harder. "But you influenced them," I realized aloud. "What did you tell them, Emma? What stories did you spin to make sure you got everything?" She shifted her weight, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. "I simply explained my financial situation honestly. It's not my fault that they wanted to take care of me." "Financial situation?" I echoed incredulously. "You mean the situation where you can't hold a job for more than 6 months? Where you spend money on luxury goods while I've worked 60-hour weeks for years? That financial situation? Not everyone measures success the way you do," she snapped, her composure cracking slightly. "Some of us want more from life than climbing some corporate ladder." "Don't you dare try to turn this around," I said, my voice rising. "This isn't about different life choices. This is about you manipulating our parents for years, making sure you were always the favorite, always the one who needed more help, more money, more attention." Emma's eyes narrowed. "You're just jealous because they loved me more." The words hung in the air between us, the unspoken truth that had shaped our entire relationship finally verbalized. In that moment, decades of suppressed hurt and anger erupted within me. "They didn't love you more," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "They indulged you more. They enabled you more. They let you manipulate them because it was easier than forcing you to grow up and take responsibility for yourself." Emma's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about. I had a special bond with them that you never understood." "A bond based on what, exactly? Your constant neediness? Your endless demands for financial support? The way you made them feel needed while I was busy being self-sufficient?" "At least I showed them I cared," she shot back. "You were always so cold and independent, acting like you didn't need them. Maybe if you'd been more present in their lives, they would have included you in the will." I felt like I'd been slapped. I called them every week. I visited every major holiday. I helped them with their taxes, their insurance, their medical appointments. Where were you for all that, Emma? Oh right, too busy spending their money in Cabo or Paris to be bothered with the mundane realities of their lives. "They never complained about my absence," she said smugly. "They were proud of my social life, my travels." "Because you sold them a fantasy," I replied, the pieces finally coming together in my mind. "You gave them the daughter who needed them, who made them feel important and generous. I made the mistake of becoming exactly what they told us to be, responsible, independent, self-sufficient." Emma checked her watch ostentatiously. "This conversation is going nowhere." Look, I'm not completely heartless. If you need to borrow some money while you adjust to this new reality, I might be able to help you out. The condescension in her tone was the final straw. I laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. You're offering to loan me money? From the inheritance that should have been partly mine? That's rich, Emma, even for you. Fine, be difficult, she said with a shrug. The will is legal. There's nothing you can do about it. As she turned to walk away, something clicked in my mind. All the years of manipulation, the careful cultivation of her image as the needy one, the fragile one, while systematically undermining my relationship with our parents. You know what the saddest part is? I called after her. I don't think this was ever about the money for you. It was about winning. About making sure you were the favorite until the very end. She paused but didn't turn around. We're done, Emma, I said with finality. Whatever relationship we had as sisters is over. Enjoy the inheritance. I hope it was worth it. She spun around, sudden panic in her eyes. You don't mean that. We're family, Haley. The only family either of us has left. No, I said quietly. Family doesn't do what you've done. Family doesn't manipulate and lie and steal. You're not my family anymore. I walked to my car without looking back, her calls fading behind me. The tears I'd been holding back finally came as I pulled onto the street, blurring my vision so badly that I had to pull over a few blocks away. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, sobbing until I had no tears left. It wasn't just about the money, though the injustice of it stung deeply. It was the confirmation of what I had suspected but never wanted to believe, that the disparity in how our parents treated us wasn't accidental or unconscious. It had been deliberate, calculated, and ultimately, Emma had orchestrated much of it. By the time I drove home to my modest condo, the one I'd saved for years to afford while Emma had lived in luxury, I felt hollowed out. Empty. I had lost not only my parents but also the last illusions I had about our family. The narrative I had told myself, that despite the favoritism, we were still a loving family at core, had been shattered beyond repair. I called in sick to work the next day, something I had done perhaps twice in my entire career. I needed time to process not just my grief for my parents but the death of the family I thought I had. A week after the devastating will reading, I found myself sitting in another law office, this one considerably less opulent than Lawrence Davidson's. Jessica Rivera of Rivera Legal Services specialized in estate disputes and inheritance law. Her office was in a converted mill building in Lowell, with exposed brick walls and simple, functional furniture. So let me make sure I understand correctly, Jessica said, reviewing the notes she'd taken during our consultation. Your parents left virtually their entire estate, valued at approximately $3 million, to your sister, while leaving you only personal items with minimal financial value. That's right, I confirmed, my voice steadier than it had been a week ago. The shock had worn off, replaced by a cold determination to understand my options. And you believe your sister may have exerted undue influence over your parents in their estate planning? I know she did, I said firmly. She admitted to me that she knew about the will terms 2 years ago, that our father had discussed it with her. Jessica nodded, making another note. That's interesting, but not necessarily proof of undue influence. However, the timing of the will update might be significant. You mentioned they revised it around the time you had a confrontation with them about their favoritism toward your sister? Yes, it was shortly after that conversation. That timing could potentially support an argument that they were acting out of anger or retribution rather than clear-headed estate planning, she observed. Massachusetts courts have sometimes overturned wills that appeared to be based on spite or punishment. For the next hour, Jessica walked me through the legal concept of undue influence and what it would take to successfully contest the will. The burden of proof would be on me to demonstrate that Emma had exerted such control over our parents that their free will had been overridden. I won't sugarcoat this, Jessica said frankly. Will contests are expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. And there's no guarantee of success. Based on what you've told me, I think you have a moderate chance, maybe 50-50, of getting the court to invalidate the will. The question you need to ask yourself is whether pursuing this is worth the financial and emotional cost. I considered her words carefully. What kind of evidence would strengthen my case? Witness testimony from people who observed the dynamic between your sister and your parents. Documentation of financial support they provided her that might suggest manipulation. Evidence of your sister's involvement in the will drafting process. Communications that might reveal pressure or influence. I thought about our family friends, our extended family, people who had observed the dynamics over the years. Most had seen the favoritism but had accepted it as normal family dynamics. Would any of them be willing to testify? I'll need some time to think about this, I told Jessica. Of course, she replied. This isn't a decision to rush into. In the meantime, I suggest you start gathering potential evidence. Speak with family friends, look for relevant emails or messages, anything that might help build your case if you decide to move forward. Over the next 2 weeks, I did exactly that. I reached out cautiously to several family friends who I thought might be sympathetic to my situation. The responses were mixed. My parents' oldest friends, the Johnsons, confirmed that they had witnessed concerning behavior over the years. Your sister always knew exactly how to get what she wanted from your parents, Martha Johnson told me over coffee. I remember once, about 3 years ago, she was talking about wanting to go to some expensive yoga retreat in Bali. Your father expressed concern about the cost, and within minutes, she had him convinced it was practically a business investment for her wellness brand she was supposedly developing. 2 days later, she had a check from him. It was uncomfortable to watch. Others shared similar stories, Emma's uncanny ability to turn every conversation to her needs, to present herself as perpetually on the verge of a breakthrough that just required a little more financial support. Several mentioned feeling that she had isolated our parents from friends who might question her influence, especially in the last few years. Meanwhile, Emma had been trying relentlessly to contact me. Her tactics evolved from conciliatory voicemails, "Haley, please call me back. We can work this out between us," to thinly veiled threats, "If you're thinking of doing something stupid like contesting the will, remember that I have the resources to fight you every step of the way." She even enlisted relatives to pressure me. My Aunt Diane called to tell me I was tearing the family apart with my jealousy and resentment. My cousin Mark suggested I should let bygones be bygones and respect what your parents wanted. I maintained my silence, focusing instead on building my potential case and considering my options. 3 weeks after my consultation with Jessica, I made a discovery that changed everything. While sorting through the few personal items I had received from my parents' estate, I found my father's old journal tucked inside the Robert Frost poetry collection. It was a simple leather-bound notebook, half filled with his neat, precise handwriting. Most entries were mundane, notes about the hardware store, reminders for appointments, occasional reflections on books he was reading. But then I found entries from 2.5 years ago, around the time they had updated their will. March 15, 2020. Met with Lawrence today about updating our estate plan. Catherine is convinced we should leave everything to Emma. Says Haley doesn't need our help. I'm not so sure. Seems unfair to reward Haley's independence with nothing while Emma gets everything because she can't manage her money. But Catherine insists Emma would fall apart without substantial support after we're gone. Emma called while we were discussing it, coincidence? Sometimes I wonder. April 2, 2020. Emma came for dinner alone tonight. Unusual without Haley also being invited. She spent hours showing Catherine and me spreadsheets of her business plan and explaining why she needs capital to launch properly. Talked about her anxiety, how she struggled while Haley has had everything come easily. Said Haley has her career and doesn't care about family legacy like she does. By the end of the night, Catherine was in tears, worried about Emma's future. I feel manipulated somehow, but Catherine is so certain. April 10, 2020. Signed the new will today. Still doesn't sit right with me, but Catherine is adamant. Emma called right after we got home, as if she somehow knew. When I mentioned feeling uneasy about the arrangement, Catherine reminded me how fragile Emma is, how Haley has always been the strong one. Maybe she's right. Maybe Haley doesn't need anything from us. Still, I can't help feeling we're making a mistake. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. Here was evidence, in my father's own handwriting, of his misgivings about the will and Emma's manipulation. It wasn't definitive proof of undue influence, but it strongly suggested that my parents, or at least my father, had been pressured into their decision. I called Jessica Rivera immediately and scheduled another appointment for the next day. After reviewing the journal entries, she agreed they significantly strengthened my case. These entries suggest your father had reservations about the estate plan and felt manipulated, she said. Combined with the witness statements you've gathered, we have a credible basis to contest the will. So what happens now? I asked. If you decide to proceed, we file a petition with the probate court contesting the will on grounds of undue influence. That will temporarily halt the distribution of assets until the court rules on the validity of the will. Your sister will be notified and given an opportunity to respond. If the case goes to trial, both sides will present evidence and testimony, and a judge will decide whether to uphold the will, invalidate it entirely, or modify the distribution. I took a deep breath. And the cost? Legal fees could run anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000, possibly more if it becomes particularly contentious. And it could take a year or longer to resolve. It was a significant financial commitment, especially with no guarantee of success. But this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth. About justice. About not allowing Emma's manipulation to stand unchallenged. I want to proceed, I said firmly. Within a week, the petition was filed, and Emma was formally served with notice of the will contest. Her response was swift and furious. First came the threatening phone call, "You have no idea what you've started, Haley. I will fight this with every penny of my inheritance." Then came the social media smear campaign. Emma posted a tearful video on Instagram claiming I was trying to dishonor our parents' final wishes out of jealousy and greed. She positioned herself as the devoted daughter who had been at our parents' side while I was too busy with my career to care about family. The extended family largely rallied around Emma, with only a few exceptions. My mother's brother, Uncle Robert, called to tell me he'd always seen through Emma's act and supported my decision to contest the will. "Your mother was blind when it came to Emma," he said. "Always made excuses for her, never held her accountable." As the legal process ground slowly forward, the emotional toll became increasingly difficult to bear. I was portrayed as the villain in my family's narrative, the greedy, jealous sister trying to steal from the fragile, grieving daughter my parents had wanted to protect. There were moments when I questioned whether the fight was worth it, whether I should just walk away and try to rebuild my life without the inheritance or the closure I sought. But each time I reread my father's journal entries, I found renewed determination. This wasn't just my fight anymore. In some way, I was fighting for my father too, for the doubts he'd had but hadn't been strong enough to act on. 4 months into the legal battle, with depositions scheduled to begin the following week, I received an unexpected phone call from Jessica. "Your sister's attorney has reached out to discuss settlement," she informed me. "They're offering you 30% of the estate to drop the contest." I was momentarily stunned. After months of Emma's public insistence that she would never give in to extortion, this was a significant shift. "Why now?" I asked. "My guess? Their lawyer has reviewed our evidence, including your father's journal, and advised them that they could lose everything if this goes to trial. 30% of $3 million is better than the risk of getting nothing." I considered the offer. $900,000 was substantial, enough to make a significant difference in my life. But the principle still bothered me. "What would you advise?" I asked Jessica. "Legally speaking, settlement offers certainty. Trials are unpredictable, even with strong evidence. But this isn't just a legal decision, Haley. It's personal too. You need to consider what will bring you the most peace." After a sleepless night contemplating my options, I realized something important. This fight had never been primarily about money. It had been about recognition. About acknowledgement of the unfairness that had shaped our family dynamics for decades. About refusing to let Emma's manipulation go unchallenged. I called Jessica the next morning. Counter at 40%, with a public acknowledgement from Emma that she influenced our parents' decision and that I was unfairly excluded from the will. The negotiation took another 3 weeks, but eventually, Emma agreed to the terms, albeit with carefully worded language for the public statement. She would acknowledge that she had prior knowledge of the will's contents and that, in retrospect, the distribution may not have reflected our parents' true intentions toward both their daughters. It wasn't a full admission of manipulation, but it was something, a crack in the perfect image she had cultivated, a public recognition that I had been wronged. The settlement was finalized 6 months after I first contested the will. I received $1.2 million, 40% of the estate, and Emma's carefully worded but still significant public statement. The legal battle had cost me nearly $40,000 in fees and untold emotional energy, but as I signed the final settlement documents, I felt something I hadn't expected, not triumph, but relief. 1 year has passed since the inheritance battle ended. The settlement money sits largely untouched in investment accounts, apart from 2 significant expenditures that felt right to me. The first was establishing the Mitchell Family Scholarship at the community college where my mother taught adult education classes on weekends. The $20,000 annual scholarship supports students who, like me, are working their way through school without family financial support. It feels like a way to honor the values my parents claimed to hold, even if their actions sometimes contradicted those values. The second was a donation to a family counseling center that specializes in addressing toxic family dynamics and favoritism. The irony that my parents might have benefited from such counseling isn't lost on me. I've been in therapy myself for the past year, working through the complex grief that comes from losing parents with whom I had such a complicated relationship. My therapist helped me understand that my parents weren't villains in this story. They were flawed humans who fell into patterns of behavior that were ultimately destructive to our family. Emma may have manipulated them, but they allowed themselves to be manipulated. My relationship with Emma remains strained and limited. After the settlement, she attempted to reconnect, suggesting we'd put the past behind us. I wasn't ready for that level of forgiveness, and I'm still not sure I ever will be. We exchange obligatory birthday texts and occasionally update each other on major life events, but the sisterly bond we had as children is irreparably broken. The extended family has slowly begun to see the situation more clearly. As Emma has continued her pattern of financial irresponsibility even with her substantial inheritance, already selling our parents' house to fund an extravagant lifestyle, some relatives have privately reached out to admit they now understand my perspective better. 6 months ago, I moved into a new home, not a mansion or anything extravagant, but a comfortable house with a garden where I can grow vegetables and flowers. Unlike the condo I bought through years of saving, this house doesn't feel like a consolation prize or a symbol of having to work twice as hard for half the recognition. It feels like a choice, a reflection of who I am and what I value. The inheritance money has provided a safety net that allows me to work fewer hours and pursue interests outside of my career. I've taken up pottery, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for when I was working 60-hour weeks. There's something deeply satisfying about creating something tangible with my hands, about the focus required to center clay on the wheel. Perhaps the most significant change has been internal. I no longer measure my worth by external validation or approval. For too long, I chased my parents' recognition, trying to prove myself worthy of the love they so freely gave my sister. Now I understand that their limitations were not a reflection of my value. I've stopped trying to be the strong one, the responsible one, the one who never needs help. I've learned to ask for support when I need it, to show vulnerability with the people I trust. I built deeper friendships than I ever allowed myself before, connections based on mutual care rather than proving my self-sufficiency. The inheritance battle, painful as it was, freed me from a lifetime of seeking validation that was never going to come. It forced me to confront the reality of my family dynamic and make peace with it, not by excusing or denying it, but by accepting it and choosing a different path forward. I don't know what my parents would think of how things turned out. I hope they would understand that I contested their will not out of greed but out of a deep need for acknowledgement of the unfairness that had shaped our family. I hope they would see that the scholarship in their name will help students who remind me of myself at that age, determined, hardworking, and in need of support. In the end, the inheritance battle gave me something far more valuable than money. It gave me freedom, freedom from seeking approval, freedom from comparing myself to my sister, freedom to define my own worth rather than accepting others' limited perception of me. If you're watching this and recognizing patterns from your own family, know that you're not alone. Family dynamics can be incredibly complex and painful, especially when favoritism is involved. But your value isn't determined by how your family treats you. Your worth isn't measured by comparisons to siblings or by the validation you receive from parents. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is to stop seeking approval from those who aren't equipped to give it fairly. Sometimes the strongest act isn't enduring mistreatment but standing up and saying this isn't right, and I deserve better. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced family favoritism? How did you handle it? Please like and subscribe if my story resonated with you, and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember that your story isn't over, and you have the power to write the chapters ahead on your own terms. Thank you for listening.